I convene the November 6th, 2024 Physical Plant Committee meeting to order at 7 p.m. Jackie, would you please call the roll?
Josh Martin.
Here.
Emily Swistak.
Here.
Marjorie Bartelli.
Here.
Karen Larson.
Here.
Vanessa Berry.
Here.
Tatiana Weinstein.
Here.
Will Savage.
Here.
Excellent. All right, agenda item 2, public comment opportunity for any visitors to speak. It's for the general public to address the board. Each person will have up to 5 minutes. I see no one here. Do we have any other public comments submitted ahead of time? No, we did not. All right, we will move on to agenda item number 3. And that is to approve the minutes of the April 1st, 2024 Physical Plant Committee meeting. I have a motion and a second, please.
I move to approve the minutes of April 1st, 2024 Physical Plant Committee meeting.
I'll second.
Excellent. Any discussion? Very good. Jackie, would you please call the roll?
Josh Martin.
Aye.
Emily Swistak.
Aye.
Marjorie Bartelli.
Aye.
Karen Larson.
Aye.
Vanessa Berry.
Aye.
Excellent. Thank you again. Agenda item number 4, facility update. Will, would you do us the pleasure of providing a facility update?
Absolutely. So there's been a lot going on. We've looked more into the seepage issue that we discovered underneath the south entrance. We are going to have a company come out and inject a bentonite solution down into the ground. They'll help fill up the cracks. We also took it upon ourselves to re-level some drain pipes that have been installed as part of the project. As the ground settled, when the project was done and the seasons happened, we found that the pipes were about 3 inches above the ground. So I had our facility monitors use a Sawzall to cut them down and then regrade and put the cap on, not only a cap on, but then a filter mesh screen over it as well. So now the drains are level to the ground so they can actually take water in and no other small debris will be getting down into the pipes. We also the 3 light poles on the south parking lot are in rough shape. They are rusting. The paint is coming off. So we're having Servpro painters come out within a week to come and scrape and refinish and repaint all those light poles. So those will be redone. You may have noticed our crosswalk is also complete. The concrete work is done. Those painters are going to be restriping that crosswalk as well. So that should all be done within the next week, hopefully before it starts getting too chilly to paint. And then I think that is all I have for number 4.
Great. Which light poles were those specifically?
So the 3 that are on our south parking lot. So if you turn in off of Kingston, there are 3 poles on that parking lot before you get the ones that are on the south side of the south lot.
Got it.
Yes.
And it's odd, it's just those that were weathered so badly that the paint is bubbling on them, but who knows why.
Yeah.
The others seem just fine.
Yep. Every other one has been checked. It's those 3 that are the problem children. So
Just superficial. It can be.
yes, yeah. The painter assured that they will scrape down and handle everything. So we should be good to go.
Excellent. Any other thoughts or comments on agenda item 4? Excellent. Thank you very much. We'll appreciate that. Agenda item number 5. The FQC recommendations, the LIRA recommendations. Tatiana, would you begin by updating the committee on those reports?
Yes, so in the packet, there is a sheet, sorry, it's not numbered, but it's like the 3rd page. There's an update sheet on the FQC report, and you see in yellow highlight, there are 2 things that are outstanding. One is to install emergency lighting at all the electrical panels, which hasn't been done yet. And then the second bullet point is replacing the circuit breakers in the building. So those are yet to be done, and I know Will has some updates on those because he talked to the electrician. And then just moving on to the second item, just flipping the page. LIRA one of their recommendations was to install a lightning rod. Is that what we're calling it?
It's written lightning protection system here, but basically lightning rods.
A lightning rod on the building. And in talking with our electrician, he assessed the building, and his recommendation is not to put a lightning rod on the building because of the height of our building. He's not seen it before, but he's going to look a little further and get a more official recommendation. I don't know if you have more to add to that.
In his experience, he said a 1 to 2 story building, adding lightning rods would only attract more lightning.
Yeah.
They serve their purpose in much taller buildings, but in the area, we're not at the top of a hill, we don't have a particularly tall building. If anything, we'd just be inviting more lightning to strike us.
Yeah.
So.
Did they quantify the risk of, or perceived risk, I should say, of not installing that? Is there, aside from maybe some of the HVAC units on the roof, is there any other particular exposure they were concerned about?
So we don't have any HVAC units on the roof, which is nice. Is Lisle our insurer, or
right? Was there some reason they, outside of just their standard, this is in our risk prevention addressable checklist?
This is in their risk prevention checklist.
Okay.
That they asked me if we had a lightning protection system. I said no. So then they throw
And then
it
they
on there.
say, periodic inspections being conducted. And I'm sure that even though it says not yet completed, in discussing this topic with them and then letting them know we consulted with an electrician, we have an official recommendation per the electrician that we use, I'm sure it can be wiped off this recommendation for whatever reasoning justification they give. And then, Will, if you could update us on the emergency lighting, electrical panels, and the circuit breakers.
Absolutely. So I did a walk around with our electrician for the emergency lighting and all panels. Since we have different panels that are in different spots in the building, some with drop ceilings, some with finished ceilings, we have electrical panels all over the place. So it is going to require different types of emergency lighting, but everything we have is totally doable. So he's going to be getting a quote for me to get lights over all of our electrical panels, and a quote on the labor as well. That was the bigger concern walking around, was just that he wanted to make sure he knew exactly what lights we'd need because the ceiling matters, and then which ones had a drop versus a finished versus just open, because then that affects how much time he would have to estimate for his guys to do the work. And then I asked him about replacing our circuit breakers, because we've had a few breakers go bad over the last year or two. And he said the first step in doing that, and the most efficient way of doing that, is they get thermographic imaging to come out and look at the box. And when everything is running, a breaker that is toward the end of its life cycle will be running hotter than it should be. So they're able to tell which ones are potentially going to be going bad soon or would need to be addressed, as opposed to replacing the entire box and then be able to go in and address the individual breakers that are, for whatever reason, look like they would be causing us issues in the near future. So he's going to give me a quote for what that would be, and we're going to assess. That'll be our first step, so that hopefully we can get this done. Maybe each box has 1 or 2 that we can just swap in and out quickly, as opposed to having to do a total overhaul.
Right.
What's the age of those panels, and by extension the breakers in them? Do you have any idea?
Whenever each part of the building was done, there have been so many.
So they are original.
Yeah, there have been so many additions to the building where we've upped our capacity that there are spots that have 5 or 6 mini panels. And then there have been times when a breaker has gone bad, like at our National Library Week event in April.
Right.
That was one of the issues, is that 2 of the breakers went bad in there, so those had to be replaced. And I'm sure over the course of the last 30 years it has happened, and so that there are some newer breakers in a panel that I don't know exactly specifically which ones were swapped out. So this is the thermographic imaging is the best way to get an idea of what work would need to be done before we take any bigger steps that might not be as cost efficient or time efficient for us. So.
Has it been one panel more often than other panels?
Not
Not
particularly.
random?
No,
Yeah,
not particularly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been both sides of the building. It's often usually when we've had our ComEd issues over the
Yeah.
last year and a half, and those we were able to figure out through ComEd that all of those blackouts or all of those
Power
surge we've
Mhm.
had have been off of property. There's
Hmm.
nothing that we can do to address it. It's probably more just the general infrastructure in the neighborhood than it is anything to do with what we have going on in the building.
That was the FQC. That was the FQC recommendation.
Yes.
So
Right.
after that, after we get those quotes, that should be the end of FQC report.
Right. On that topic, though, you mentioned that there have been a number of additional panels that have been installed. Is there any thought with that contractor to evaluate either condensing those from an efficiency perspective because they have proliferated as expansions have happened? Is there any value in that? Obviously, the number of breakers is a greater opportunity to have to replace them all. Is that something that, to your point, Tatiana, should be added to a larger evaluation of a future FQC report where we look at the electrical infrastructure overall?
The short answer is no. I actually asked him the same question when he was out, and he said it would cost so much money
Okay.
to do that. We
Great.
might as well, whenever the building literally falls down, then then we'd address that.
Okay.
At least at this point.
Sure.
So it'll be something that like I am as part of my duties will be keeping an eye on, and if we do start experiencing some more issues and ComEd says, hey, maybe it's coming from inside the house,
Right.
Then we'll address. But I had the same thought,
Okay.
and the electrician told me that at this point, because we aren't having any issues, just let
Right.
it be. Yeah.
And the breakers are still readily available. There's no end of life. It's not a discontinued maker model.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Very good. Excellent. And on that same subject about the FUC report, in evaluating it and seeing that many of the items on the FQC report were completed with the renovation and other independent activities, would recommend sunsetting the existing FQC report and working with CCS to provide an updated assessment to see what additional activities we would want to consider, and or if there's anything from the 2030 and beyond portion of the report that needs to be reevaluated.
Yeah, I would agree. We are working with Mark at like a 10-year plan,
Mhm.
like to see what's going forward. And I think that would encompass like replacing possibly the roof in 10 years, depending, and other larger facility projects. But I mean, we're at the end of the FQC report after we
Mhm.
manage the circuit breakers and the lighting over them. So that makes sense. I mean, it's a 2019
Mhm.
report.
Yes.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So yeah.
It's been 5 years.
Yeah.
Is there any additional recommendations that we're likely to get from Lisle in addition to that, or anything that we could consider beating them to the punch, so to speak, outside of their lightning rod recommendation?
Every year they do an assessment and they
Right.
walk through and they see if there's any risks in the building, and they've already been through to see what we've done. So the lightning rod was one.
Right.
And then we just go back to them with whether, we move forward with one or not, and the reasonings why we would or wouldn't. And then the next year they come around and they're like, oh, maybe you want to put up signage around your building for ice buildup or something like that. And we've already done that.
Yep.
That's just an
Right.
example. So like every year they might come up with something else for every library they assess. So
Like they, one of their big initiatives 2 years ago was installing little like water monitoring
Yeah,
pucks.
we did that.
Yeah,
So
I
they
saw
did
the
that for
picture.
every library
For
that
flooding.
they cover to prevent flooding issues. So like Tatiana said, it's usually something like a all libraries initiative that they will decide like this is our thing this year because we saw X number of claims in the last 2 years and we want to try to mitigate that. So
Any other thoughts or comments on the FQC report or Lisle recommendations? Okay, so then we'll continue to work with CCS on that one as we move forward. All right, then moving on to agenda item 6. One of the things that I wanted to explore was the EV charging station potential. I know that we have some information, and we've spoken with the village manager as well. Tatiana, would you give us an update on that, please?
Yeah, so in your packet, hopefully you had some chance to look at some of the links that were provided. Thank you, Trustee Berry, for the links. And I also supplied communication between the village manager and myself regarding their plans for an EV charging station. They did go for a grant through ComEd, which is like a $10,000 matching grant, I imagine. It's matching. And so I was happy he sent me that, although they terminated the electric contract and they're going out to rebid for it. I don't know all the details on that. So they're starting the process. I called the village manager to talk about like where they're at with it, because it's always nice to have someone take the first step and see what's going on. So he said basically their first steps are for one charging station, which they've already purchased. And if you know anything different, let me know if you've talked to any of the other village trustees. But they've purchased a charging station, and then they have to go out for bid for the install of it. The village manager mentioned if we're looking at something like this in the future, that to consider having it on a flat parking lot space without a lot of curbing around it, because that's, I believe they're running into a little bit of an issue with where they initially said they wanted it, and I think it was on School Street.
Mhm.
So, and I don't know a lot about this, it was a brief conversation, but he said that when you're installing one of these, they have to obviously connect to
Mhm.
ComEd equipment. And if you've got a lot of curbing, it's cutting around it, making sure it's flat. So that was one thing he wanted to make sure that we consider. The other thing he said was, well, what I asked him about is charging. So I'm guessing, well, I called to confirm today, but at first he said they're putting it not in the downtown, just off downtown, and that it's going to be for 2 hours
Mhm.
because other parking around town is like 2-hour
Sure.
limits, and that they're going to be granting whomever parks there 2 hours of charging free, which
Wow.
would surprise me. So
Impressive.
I thought he meant it was 2-hour parking free. So I called to confirm today, and he said, well, parking's free downtown. So it's really 2 hours. And I said, so you are gifting 2 hours of charging someone's car for free? And he said, yes. And again, it was a brief conversation, and maybe this is a proposal and
Right.
not in writing.
Yeah.
But
Huh.
I imagine it's more in terms of it being initiative, like an initiative, an incentive,
Right.
to get people to use it. But I think that's very generous
Incredibly generous.
because I try to equate it to like cars who use gasoline. Like
Yes.
we don't do that for
Yeah.
people who use it. But I think it's, again, an incentive to encourage people to use green energy and and
Good.
you come downtown and things like that.
Yeah.
So that was shared. And then after that, I was thinking about, the library, the park district, the school district, and if the library was ever interested in doing an EV charging station, like I would want an intergovernmental group approach to it with ComEd or whomever, or maybe the EV charging station, because there's companies that just sell the station, and there's
Mhm.
companies that do the install, and then there's ComEd
Mhm.
who might offer discounts
Right.
for doing this in a community. So my thinking is, why not take a intergovernmental approach to approaching a big company like ComEd with a discount?
Mhm.
So if you can discount anything for us, why, you could possibly provide more cost savings for all the intergovernmental entities. So I talked to Eric, village manager Ermont, about that. And since they are, again, in the first steps of doing something like this, he has connections with ComEd representatives in this area. And so he agreed to look into having a meeting with the intergovernmental directors so that we could even propose something like that. I just wanted to share that with you. I don't know what the committee thinks about EV charging stations in general, and that's why we're here to talk
Sure.
about it. So
That's great.
that's my update.
No, I think that's a good idea because if you could have one at the park district, one at the library, you might get a discount.
Did they mention if they have started talking to electrical contractors yet, or if they're still in the very beginning phases of just scoping it overall? I didn't see that specifically.
Well, when they said they're going out to, they've terminated the electric contract award and will need to rebid.
Right.
That's in red. Then he also recommends getting engineering plans and specs completed before you bid, blah, blah, blah. I'm not 100% sure, but if you have questions, I can bring it to the group.
Well, I would be curious which, and Trustee Barry, you might have more information on this. If ComEd is subsidizing the stations themselves or offering a rebate, I don't think there's any discount on the power itself.
No, not on the power, but I
Right.
bet it's through either the Inflation Reduction Act
Sure.
or CJA.
Right.
There's grant money and rebates and all sorts of stuff that comes from
Right. I mean, we
federal government.
could also approach any number of contractors directly. I've worked with several who do charging as a service. I don't know if they would offer municipal discounted rates, but it is something that we could ask, and I still know some contacts in the area who have done work on EV charging stations, both from a charging as a service or from a pure physical install. They turn it over, and then we're at our liberty to set our own rates, or 2 hours of free charging is really generous, depending on what type of charger. Did they say what type of chargers they're looking at? Are they looking at fast chargers or just a standard?
I didn't
7
ask
to
about
10
that, but
kilowatt?
yeah,
Okay.
I've watched some of the meetings when they
Mhm.
started talking about it, and my understanding was that they were going for a fast charge.
Really?
Mhm.
That's incredibly expensive. Those are
But that was one
Substantial.
conversation I saw.
Okay.
I try to watch as many as I can, but
Right.
I didn't, that was one, I know that got brought up at one
Right.
meeting.
right.
And some charging stations, it takes like 4 hours to
Yeah.
charge a car.
Yes.
right?
Yes,
So-
if they're lower kilowatt hour throughut, they would take a little longer.
Those
So-
are usually the free ones.
Right, that's
The
what I was
small ones.
thinking. Yes.
So who pays for the charging? Who pays for the utility?
It'd have to be the village,
Village.
right? If they're connected to
If
the electrical.
the village, but if we decided to do it,
We would
we-
have to decide if we were going to subsidize the electric basically ourselves, or the end user could use a credit card. You could do it one of two ways.
right?
So I will add that I was in
Yeah.
a meeting with a bunch of other facility managers and assistant directors a couple months ago, and this was the topic. And every
Oh.
other library that does this does partner with Service, who then charges
Right.
the end user.
Yeah,
Um,
they don't do it for free.
Right,
No.
right.
Yeah.
ChargePoint, Electrify America, EVgo, they all
Yes.
have services that they.
Mhm.
And I
We
think the
could
village is
discount it.
ChargePoint.
Is it ChargePoint?
I think
okay.
so.
Yeah, they're very popular.
Mhm.
There's any number of ways that you could do it. We could offer a subsidy off of whatever it is. We could choose not to charge peak charging rates. There's any number of different ways that we could structure it to be advantageous to try and attract people to it. But I do agree that it's something worthwhile pursuing,
Mhm.
because I'm not sure where the closest EV charging station is in Lisle, to be honest. You would probably
No,
have a good
my
idea.
house.
Your house.
That's where I charge, so I haven't really tracked
So there's
where
no one anywhere else
they are
but
around
yes.
here.
Well,
I
and
haven't
the
needed it, but-
difference is between, the library as an entity and the village as an entity. I mean,
Right.
the village has, we have 3 or 2 right now, EV stores, where you can buy EV vehicles,
That's
and then
true.
the village
That's
takes
true. It's a new
in
one.
sales tax
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
from it. So, I mean, it's kind of an even
Mhm.
back, but
Yeah.
we don't do that.
Mhm.
And I don't know what any other library who
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we could do
Right.
like the first 15 minutes are free or whatever to encourage people to
Right.
use it. But yeah.
How many other local libraries have EV charging stations?
Do you remember in the meeting?
It
It
was.
wasn't a huge amount,
It
right?
wasn't a huge amount, and it was no one super close by.
Really?
Yeah. I was
No,
gonna
it was
say.
not Downers or Naperville or.
But I would imagine like in the future,
Yes.
you
We'll
know,
get there.
Yeah.
yeah.
I
So
wonder too. There's another program through the state of Illinois where if you put in a charger within a mile of a highway exit, you can get that highly
I heard about
subsidized.
that. Yeah.
But I don't know.
Hmm.
I think we're kind of right on the edge.
Yeah.
That might be worth looking into as well.
And I did take a look at the. I know I sent the link
Mm-hmm.
from the packet from the village, and I tried reading as much as I could. It was like a very long packet with a lot of like diagrams and such for the for their project. But did I read that like all told, buying the station install, it's about $50,000,
Yeah.
something like that.
Mhm.
And then of course the village would pay for the 2 hours
Right.
of charging. So like if we were to think about it, depending on you know who we went with and when we went with, it would be a $50,000
Right.
like upfront.
Mhm.
A lot of that does depend on the distance from the panel that they're going to run it out of. So
Right.
it's advantageous to keep that as close to
Your
the
equipment.
building and the utility as possible,
Mhm.
because there will have to be some trenching and some concrete work. It's a decent civil install.
And those are all charges that we would absorb.
We would have to or get some kind of grant or subsidy or offset, or see if there's a way that, again, a contractor who is doing multiple installs in the area could say, well, I'm here and it's easy if I know I have 3 or 4 installs versus one singular install, that they can account for like a larger lot of conduit and wire and concrete and other things like that. So that is an opportunity versus they had to come out 3 individual times. It's just economy of scale.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, and a
yeah, we'd
lot
have
of
to
like the
absorb most of
state
it.
and federal programs are rebates as well. So you pay up
Sure.
front, but then you get the money back.
right, which I don't know how that even works for us.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like,
Mhm.
I want to
Uh,
see how the village handles it first
Right.
before we pursue it or go any further. That's personally the way I feel. So
I agree with you, Karen, that we should kind of let them
let
go
them be
first
the
and
experiment.
see what happens, and then kind of go from there.
Yeah.
yeah, unless we could get in on a deal if
Right.
all the
Or if there is grant money available that says,
Right.
hey, we want these in more public spaces.
Mhm.
Because the other thing you have to think about is if you are talking to a business owner or someone else, they're giving up a parking space. So we're just willing to host it. There might be opportunities for grant or subsidy. So
Yeah, I mean,
that's something to
is
explore.
sorry.
No, that was it.
So I'm asking if the committee thinks it's a good idea for me to meet with the rest of the intergovernmentals to gain more information. And just a reminder, if there's grants, it's usually a matching grant where
Mhm.
they're giving like a small amount, a percentage of it, or half and half, where the library would pay half, the grant would take care of the other half, those kind of things. But yeah, in general, it's about a $50,000 investment, and then you have that,
What
depending on what discounts you get or whatever.
Mhm.
do you get the feeling that the village is intending to move forward with this? That they've
I do.
already okay.
I do, and actually, village manager mentioned that they're looking at a second one, because he's also interested in fleet vehicles and
I
making
did see that in your
making
note
kind
about
of transfers
fleet.
from
Mhm.
gas to electric
Yeah.
for some fleet vehicles. So, and that might be true for the other entities in town, like
School district.
maybe the school park,
Yeah.
fire,
Right.
maybe even for some of the vehicles. So yeah, it's probably a long conversation after the intergovernmentals talk about it, and if we're all like,
Right.
yeah, we're all thinking about it, then it's going to be
Right.
talking to ComEd or other
Right.
other companies who sell these stations, and like, what can they give us
Mhm.
if we're all on the same page? So
Mhm.
I would like to have more information on it.
Yeah, me too.
Any other specific questions that you want me to take to these meetings?
Does anyone, I've read articles where they have difficulty not monitoring people leave their vehicles, don't disconnect.
Yeah.
And then you've got to go through the process of finding the vehicle owner. Are there tickets involved or not?
Mhm.
It can be a nuisance in that respect. Normally, everyone's fairly cooperative because it's an
You're
advantage,
absolutely
but
correct.
I wonder, like, I know with like ChargePoint and some of those, like if you overstay your time, then you start getting charged for it.
that would be a good
So-
incentive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're absolutely correct. That is a pitfall of the whole system,
Mhm.
whereby just being parked in that area
Mhm.
stops everyone else
Mhm.
from being able to charge.
Mhm.
And if you don't respect it and act as a good citizen and partner, you could have a problem.
Tatiana, how difficult would it be to find out if there are any libraries within a decent proximity to us, just to talk to them and say, how does it work?
Yeah, I can put a
Success.
call out. I've got, we get a lot of like other directors and email chains and things
Great.
like that. So I can put a call out and see who's got this, who's thinking
Yeah.
about this.
Mhm.
I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, who's navigated all of the
Mhm.
government stuff? 'Cause
Mhm.
it's so complicated.
It's a lot. Yeah, it is a lot.
I think the other piece of it too is just, if we're putting all this money out into
Mhm.
it, like when would we potentially see the return on our
Right.
investment, right? Like,
Yeah.
because do we want to be
Yep.
out this money, or are we hoping that this is going to be an additional revenue source for us?
Yes, and I know, I mean, this was, the village manager said they are not looking this as a revenue source in any way.
Right. But I,
They get
I imagine that we
Right.
would
They
be.
receive revenue
Well,
for sales taxes.
And that was my question, very much similar. What do they calculate as their return on investment from those sales taxes? And I guess what are they allocating, right? Because it may be cost neutral, but they're not putting in an expense line into their budget. They're taking revenues from elsewhere and offsetting their charger install. So I'd be curious how they plan to justify that,
Mhm.
because we don't have as much leverage in that regard.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, so more information.
Yeah.
Yes.
More information.
That's good, but there's,
But
everybody's on board with
Mhm.
getting more
Yeah.
info and
Yeah.
curiosity. I know
Yeah.
that's, okay.
Excellent. Any other overall comments on EVs and information? Okay, excellent. The last item on the agenda is to adjourn. May I have a motion and a second? You get to do this again.
No, am I like a voting person? I could do that? Okay, fine.
Yes.
I move to adjourn.
Yes, you're a voting person.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned at, what time is it? 7:33.